Good morning and welcome back to June 2022's Real Estate Live UK programme. Thanks for joining us for this session, Ealing, Investing in Place, in partnership with Ealing Council. The Real Estate Live UK programme takes place 3 times a year and is brought to you by White Label, our partners and sponsors. For this edition, we've moved away from the fully virtual programme as we headed to Liverpool yesterday for an exclusive in-person investor roadshow, with sessions available to view online for free as always. If you were unable to watch those sessions live yesterday, don't panic. They will be available online as with all our other sessions that are taking place during the week. Just head to our YouTube channel. That is youtube.com/Real Estate Live UK. Just before we get underway, we'd like to thank all the organisations contributing to the panels we've got taking place this week. Places across the UK have been showcasing themselves to investors and developers, and industry-leading experts have been exploring ideas on how the property and regeneration sectors can continue to thrive as we discuss the programme's key topics, which include free ports, the rise of the industrial and logistics sector, and the role of culture in creating and sustaining communities. You can find out more about Real Estate Live UK by visiting our website, www.realestatelive.co.uk. Right now, we're heading into a session hosted in partnership with Ealing Council, where we'll be looking at how Ealing Council and its partners are investing in place. Just before we start, I'd like to remind you, the audience, to please feel free to ask questions using Zoom's Q&A function. And now I'm pleased to hand over to our chair for this session, Nicola Mathers, CEO of Future of London. Over to you, Nicola.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Callum, and lovely to see so many of you this morning. We've got a great next hour planned where we're really going to focus on the issue of community engagement, which is a topic very close to my heart, having started my career doing community development. So in Ealing, lots of exciting things happen. We've got the Elizabeth line coming in, 2 new cinemas, so a lot's going on. But what the council are really keen to do is to make sure that the communities of Ealing are engaged in that development work and have a real positive influence. And what we're going to hear this morning is some ideas, some concepts, some real life projects on how they're achieving that genuine community engagement. So we've got a fantastic panel for you. We've got 3 members of the Ealing Council team. So we've got Conor, McDonagh, Assistant Director of Economic Growth. We've got Joanna, Sumner, Assistant Director of Communities, and we've got Tan Asfal, the Community Engagement Manager, who's actually doing all the work on the ground, which is great. And they're going to be joined by Nicola Wheeler, Head of Community Investment Catalyst, and Grace Williams, who's Director of Loom Project. So if I can ask my panel to switch their cameras on, that would be fantastic. We really want this to be as interactive as possible, so really encourage you to put in your Q&A, your questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. We've got a fantastic panel, so feel free to ask questions of the panel. But we're going to kick off really just to kind of set the context and give some insight into what's happening in Ealing, with me asking a couple of key questions to our panel. And I'm going to start with Conor. And the question to you is, what Ealing's communities expect from the private sector, and how is Ealing Council working with its partners to ensure that residents and the needs of residents and businesses are met?
Thank you, Nicola. Thanks for the introduction. And it's a real pleasure to be on this panel today. So hopefully we can answer many nice questions from the audience as well. Yeah, so as Nicola said, I'm Conor McDonagh, Assistant Director for Economic Growth at Ealing Council. So just start by just giving a quick synopsis of what that means. So that means sort of overseeing the council's regeneration strategy across our high streets and across our many commercial areas, including the residential hinterlands of those. Also working on our economic development, so business support, business growth, inward investment, climate action, and we've also got the new local plan for Ealing, which we're currently drafting at the moment. So lots going on, very exciting period for the council at the moment. Before I actually answer the question in detail, Nicola, I think the first thing I'd like to say is we've got a very, very strong vision now in Ealing. So just had the local elections, we've got a leader, we've got a cabinet that are very, very focused on delivering for Ealing residents, putting Ealing residents and businesses at the very heart of everything we want to be doing from now on. So we've got a very clear vision around creating 10,000 new jobs, 4,000 new homes, and really dealing with those big structural things we're all dealing with in terms of climate action, fighting inequality, and building a more inclusive economy for everyone. So how am I dealing with that in my world in the council? I guess having very proactive conversations and engagement with lots of stakeholders, including our businesses, residents, and all the developers and investors who want to come to Ealing. So that's really important. So I guess, what do we expect from our partners? I think this is probably well known, and probably just repeating things that might be known already, but maybe it's just useful to reinforce them. So there's three things I would say. It's probably the first thing would be engaging, listening, and developing a very, very deep understanding of the community they seek to invest in or develop in. I think that's absolutely critical. If you get that right at the very start, then your journey in investing in Ealing will be much easier and smoother. Get that at the very start. Second point would be acting on that. So it's not just listening, it's not just ticking the box and saying, yeah, we've listened and we understand what your thoughts are. It's actually acting on it and being very open and transparent and candid about how you're doing that. It's not all, you can't achieve everything that everybody wants, so there's certainly compromises to be made, but compromises are fine so long as the community understand what those compromises are at the very start. You can't please everybody, and in Ealing we fully understand that. It's a borough where we're trying to get lots of new regeneration, good growth and investments, so there'll always have to be some compromises. That's important to say as well. And as a borough of officers and members and politicians, compromise is the thing that we welcome and would like to work on with the development industry. And then the third point is just delivering on what was agreed, including those compromises, and actually delivering that. So the third step, that's key, getting that delivered, working with the community and delivering that as well. So the second part of your question, I think what other things we're doing is, okay, well, my service, the economic growth service, is very much about proactive engagement. So we're very much focused on that. And we're also collecting lots of data about the whole borough, so socioeconomic profile of the whole borough, including the sort of 7 towns that comprise our borough. So we've already got a deep understanding of that as officers, and we want to share that evidence with our partners and developers and investors so they can see that very early on. We're also developing a number of structures to work better with key partners. For example, we recently set up our High Streets Task Force, so that's very much focused on our high street businesses, high street investors, high street landlords. So working really closely with them about how can we reimagine and repurpose our high streets was really important. Also developing a new investment model as well. So Robin and Aisha from my team are currently working on that. So we hope to launch that later in the summer. So watch this space on that. So lots of things going on. I'll pick up more later in the conversation, Nicola. I'll stop there.
Brilliant, thank you. Yes, we'll definitely do that. Now I'd like to bring Nicola in. So Nicola works for Catalyst, who work very closely with the council. Nicola, can you tell us about how Catalyst and the Openhab Block project are creating a place that promotes a thriving environment for both existing and new communities?
Sure, thank you very much, Nicola, and thank you for the opportunity to represent Catalyst here today. As Nicola said at the beginning, I'm the head of our community programmes and services at Catalyst, so I'm responsible for all of our community centres. There's 20 of them across London and the home counties, but 7 of them are in the borough of Ealing. All of our kind of customer and colleague volunteering, as well as what our community investment offer looks like in places where we're building new homes. We're a housing association which has its origins in Ealing. We've been working in the borough for over 70 years, and we own and manage over 5,000 homes in the borough, largely in the town centres of Acton and Southall. And I've had the privilege of being able to work in Southall for over 6 years and have led Catalyst community investment offer on the Havelock estate. The Havelock estate is a council estate which was prioritised for regeneration back in 2008, and we've worked as the council's regeneration partner since 2014 to deliver the first phase of that regeneration programme, which was 289 new homes and 6,000 square metres of new parkland and green space, which runs right the way through the heart of the new neighbourhood. But what was really interesting to me when I started working in Southall was how we could bring benefit from the regeneration forward for those people that weren't otherwise due to benefit from it for quite a long way further down the master planning. And Openhab Block is a project which we developed with Ealing Council to really think about how we could bring meanwhile uses to Havelock whilst the wider regeneration works were going about. And the premise of the project is basically that there's a lot of space on the Havelock estate that is completely sort of sealed off. It's sort of underground garage spaces that, from a community safety point of view, were enclosed to try to kind of better manage some of the antisocial behaviour and criminal activity that was happening on the estate. And what we're seeking to do through the Open Havelock project is to transform 36 of these disused garages and about 2,000 square metres of otherwise closed off public realm to really bring forward a community facility that supports play, sport, recreation, and just creates opportunities for people to come together on the Havelock estate in Southall, a place that's experiencing huge amounts of change. You know, lots of kind of people moving to the area for the first time, but a very well established and long-standing existing community there. The project is funded through Good Growth, the Mayor of London's Good Growth funding. They've put about £800,000. It's about £800,000 of external funding. About £600,000 of that comes through the Mayor of London. And Catalyst are also putting some capital funding into the project, and the council have granted a 5-year fully subsidised lease to Catalyst to bring forward those improvement works and to deliver the project. The project's currently on site and is due to finish this summer, and we're looking forward to launching that in sort of September time. But it's really been a kind of a partnership piece, recognising that those people that were due to be in the final phases of the regeneration, wouldn't benefit, and we were really interested in exploring what could be done. And this project will really improve the access to the Grand Union Canal towpath, this amazing resource that runs through the back of the neighbourhood. It's largely underutilised. A lot of people through our feasibility work spoke about, community safety concerns. It's quite inaccessible. The way the estate was originally built, it sort of backs away from the towpath, so the access is quite informal. It's quite difficult to get onto the towpath, and when you do, the towpath is degraded to such an extent that it regularly pools with puddles and is difficult for people to walk or cycle or use that. And lots of people told us that they didn't even know that the canal towpath was there. It's very overgrown, the hedgerow, so if you lived on the Havelock estate, you may not have had the opportunity to access that. So with Ealing Council and the Canal and Rivers Trust, who are our other partner on the project, we're really looking at how we can improve this connectivity between the Havelock estate and celebrate this green-blue corridor that connects Havelock to lots of other places in the borough, and help people to connect with nature and to use and enjoy the towpath for a whole range of health and wellbeing activities, whether that's walking or cycling or paddling or play. But yeah, so the project's it's a meanwhile use project. It's a meanwhile spaces project. Ultimately, the project site will be demolished as part of the future phases of the regeneration. But we've always assumed a minimum 5-year operating period, which, when you think about it, is quite significant in the life of a child or it's an adolescence. So we're really interested in how we can use this opportunity to kind of really explore what will work for the existing and the new community that is moving to the area, and to make sure that it's a place that really responds to those needs and aspirations over a prolonged period of time.
Thanks very much, Nicola. How amazing to have a waterway in that area, but it's really surprising how much waterway there is in London that's just completely inaccessible, and it's such an amazing resource. So really, really interesting. I think we'll come back maybe a bit later on to the kind of processes in which you went through to engage those communities. But I'm now going to hand over to Grace. So Grace is from, excuse me, Loom Projects, and it would be great to hear about the Absolute Beginners project, I believe, at Royal Park, at Park Royal, and how's that specifically engaging with young people in the area, thinking of young people obviously as the next generation of people. So Grace, over to you.
Thank you, Nicola. So yes, I am a consultant and I help artists and creatives to kind of think through and deliver projects that help benefit communities. And particularly, I'm working at the moment around Park Royal. I've been working in the area for about 4 years, where there's a lot of regeneration and change kind of imminent. It's also one of the largest industrial areas in the UK. So there's this real interesting mix of kind of big businesses, small businesses, lots of artists and creatives, and lots of new residents and existing residents on the periphery. So the Absolute Beginners Project was actually a pilot project, took place last year, that was funded through the Arts Council and the Heritage Lottery Fund's Great Place scheme. And I'm now working with the project to help develop and fundraise and plan it to become a more permanent project. So the premise is that young people are brought into a program over 5 to 6 months where they are the absolute beginners. So it's people that haven't had any experience in making things with their hands or creating products or running a business. And they're taught in small groups how to make things from scratch, and it's everyday goods. So in the pilot phase, they made paper, A4 paper, shoes and cups, and all of the materials are sourced locally from discarded or unneeded materials in Park Royal Industrial Estate. And all the products are made sort of very lo-fi, off-grid, without using any kind of energy. So it's all about sustainability, teaching young people how to make things with their hands, and also just looking at what we might need to do to be more resourceful in the future. So the pilot phase was really successful last year, but it was a short-term project, and what we're now looking to do is try to set up an actual permanent factory space in Park Royal where young people from the area can be employed and actually develop new products to make themselves that can then be sold in the local area. So it's sort of got multiple benefits around actual learning practical skills, but also confidence building, building a community, and we will take them through the whole process of marketing their products. And our dream would be that all of the businesses in Park Royal might buy these goods. So it could be like soap or I don't know, any sort of thing you need, and that we can slightly disrupt in this very small area some of the supply chains or some of the kind of consumption that happens where things are often imported from afar, and how can we make that more locally rooted.
That sounds amazing. Can I just ask, how old are the young people that you're working with?
So they're 17 to 21.
Right.
And last year we worked with 20 young people, but we're looking to expand it and make it more of a long term. So they would take part for a few months, and then they would sort of hopefully move on to, maybe starting up their own business or setting up different things. But we'd have a lot more people that we can benefit.
So we're going to be watching out for them on Dragon's Den, right? Brilliant. Thanks, Grace. And now, Joanna, I'd like to invite you to talk about how Ealing Council is working with communities to ensure that the voices are not just heard, but as Conor was saying at the beginning, actually feedback is really listened to and actioned on. And I think, Tan, you might come in on this as well. So, Joanna, can we see you?
As soon as I turn my camera on, I can't hear anybody else. So
okay, yeah, that's fine. You can leave it off. Yeah.
Okay. So thanks, Nicola. So over the last year, Ealing started to take quite a different approach to engaging with its communities. We've made this completely central to how we plan and carry out what we do across the board, where previously we had the more conventional approach to doing communications and then consultation at the later stages of decision making. And we've set out some principles for this and started to apply these principles in practice to some of the things that Conor was talking about a minute ago. I'm not going to go through all the principles, but I've picked out 3 for my 3 minutes. And the first one is about, it's not about people being hard to reach. The second is about getting people involved early on. And the third is about why emotion matters in this. So doing engagement properly is not, we think, is not about reaching people we've defined as hard to reach, because we know where people are. Councils by definition know where people live, because in elections the politicians go and knock on people's doors, and most people pay as council tax. They've run our council tax register. So it's more that they don't want to talk to us because they don't trust us enough to want to bother, or because they can't see the point, or because they don't feel that they've got something important enough to be worth saying, which has come up in some of the stuff we've done around the shaping Ealing engagement, or we just haven't made it easy enough or attractive enough to people because most people, to be frank, have got better things to do with their time. So we know there are different geographic, demographic and individual communities of interest, and these all play a part in defining what might draw people in and how they wish to engage. And we like this ambiguity that's brought with these different interests, even within one person. And so we know that we need to go to where people are to talk to them about the things that matter to them. And I think Tan's going to say a bit about this in a minute. So the second principle is about getting people involved early on in decision making, and our principle is about investing in the tools and mechanics of consultation before a decision is made and not after. So we've been working with Conor and colleagues in planning on the Shaping Ealing engagement, asking people very open questions about what they think about where they live, what they like about it, what they'd like to see improved. And we're now playing this back to people, what's been said by their kind of neighbours, and also how it's influenced what's happened next. So then we've got a narrower set of questions that they can express a view on in the next round. And so people can then see the point over time of getting involved, and it's about the kind of longer term. It's not just about one-off exercises. So, and then the third principle is that we will value emotion and how things feel for people as a valid part of building a kind of better outcomes. And this is because we care about doing things with people and not to them. And if we know we can't do that job properly unless we understand how people feel about what's happening here. So it's not, and public authorities tend to do this. It's not about explaining repeatedly what the benefits are, what the benefits of regeneration and development in particular are. It's about understanding how people feel about change. The same for me, same for anyone, that you have an emotional reaction to this kind of thing and not just a rational one. And we know from the work that we've done in our kind of Race Equality Commission that we carried out over the last year, that a lot of people are angry because they feel they've been ignored and left behind. And if we understand that and the kind of some of the detail about that, we can do something about it. And this all matters because we're trying to create communities in a place over the longer term, and where people, and I think this is particularly important, people don't necessarily think that the new opportunities, the new kind of developments, employment and so on are something that they can take advantage of, and they tend to think that it's designed for someone else and not them. But if we can build that trust that people that are working here have got their interests at heart, they're more likely to think that this is something for them, kind of take advantage of it and kind of work with us on kind of realising kind of the best benefits for all of this for them, their families and their neighbours. So that's it from me. I don't know if Tan, you want to bring Tan in here to add to that.
Oh, sorry, Tan, can you switch or unmute yourself? Thank you.
Can't believe I still did that. I just wanted to add to what Joanna said. What's key to adopting a really good engagement strategy is actually knowing your audience and knowing your audience really, really well. And we know the private sector does that incredibly well. And again, we've got reams and reams of data on our communities. We know what they look like. And so it's really important and far more intelligent to be able to look at all the sort of trusted connections that are out there and build that rapport and make sure that there's representation there as well, rather than thinking that you can be everything to everyone, and also recognizing that not everybody's going to want to take part in that conversation. We spent last year working on under Lord Woolley on the Race Equality Commission, and it was a very challenging type of engagement to have over a very sensitive subject, and we recognize that. But we also recognize that in order to have that conversation, we had to build that trust. We had to make sure that representation existed. And again, going back to what Joanna said, hard to reach simply implies that there's a deficiency in the community, but actually there isn't, that it's about us and us not being able to communicate well. And so they really are underserved communities and not hard to reach communities. And going back to the commission, we worked with communities, people who had already that trust with local people, to be able to get them to trust us to have those conversations. So engagement isn't necessarily, a survey. It has to be much more than that.
Thank you, Tan. I think that's so important, isn't it? And it takes longer, but those conversations are so important to understand where people are, how they feel. I love this idea of acknowledging it's about people's emotions, because change is, you know, especially if you're in an area of regeneration, you've got disruption going on for potentially 15, 20 years. But it's scary for people, and not knowing whether you're going to, you know, come out a bit better off is really important to have those discussions with people. So I'm going to come back to we've got a question about culture, so Nicola, I'll come back to that. But I think what would be really nice to hear from Nicola and Tan and maybe Grace is, can you give us some real sort of great examples of how you've gone about doing community engagement? So all of you have talked about understanding the communities and who they are. If you could give us some examples of actual sort of projects that you've done and who you've been engaging with, I think that would be great for the audience. So I don't know who wants to go first. Maybe Nicola.
Thank you. Really, really great points there, Joanna and Tan. And I think, you know, that really, that sort of experience of needing to have those ongoing conversations is so key. And I think as a housing association, I always find it so interesting because, you know, we're committed to the communities that we serve in perpetuity. When we provide homes as a housing association, it's about being there for the long term. And we often think about sort of development and regeneration as time-bound periods, you know, when, you know, it can be over kind of 5-10 years, even longer maybe, but still the sort of quite time-bound periods. And I think we have to, it is about much more than that. Like, the development is just a small part of that conversation. It's an ongoing thing. And at Havelock, I guess the thing that keeps coming back to me, Nicola, this will be familiar to you, but this idea of like start with the park from CABE days back in 2005, that policy document that was written, which is pretty much, I think, when I started my career. But start with the park is a principle that runs through almost everything I think we've done at Havelock, which is, there's two things in there for me. The first thing is about recognizing the importance of green space and the impact that has on people's lived experience, and that the quality of green space, the environment at Havelock was something which came through really strongly in the feedback that we had from people about, you know, what they both loved about where they live, but also some of the things that they found quite challenging. And the second thing about Start with the Park is just about starting. It's about starting to do something, to bring people together, to just achieve, you know, the smallest thing, which can actually start to have an impact and build that trust, start to demonstrate that as an organisation wanting to work in a place like Havelock in Southall, that by making small changes, we can make bigger changes happen. And, you know, Open Havelock has evolved from a series of projects over time. You know, the first thing was getting some litter pickers from the McDonald's capital cleanup project and just doing some like very simple litter picking neighbourhood action days. That evolved into a Tesco's Bag for Help bid with Canal and Rivers Trust, who we hadn't worked in partnership with before, but really sort of set some parameters around, you know, how we had a shared kind of objective, how we could work together, how we could deliver something. And again, that was, I think, £10,000 worth of project funding to do some towpath regeneration works and vegetation clearance, again, like visibly present, making a difference, gradually working with people and bringing them on board. And I think this idea of kind of, you know, projects by their nature, they're time bound, and that's great for many reasons. But as developers working in communities with a kind of long-term interest, we have to think about this project's continuum. You know, it's not just a start and finish. It has to be about how does this then lead to something else. And the Open Havelock project in itself has kind of had, you know, a feasibility stage and a project testing phase and an activation stage where we've delivered a whole host of different engagement activities as part of that. And even when we finish the works on site, I still only really see that as the beginning of the engagement. You know, there's still so much more to do. And what's really encouraging for me is to see that, you know, the partners that we've been working so closely with over the last 6 years, including the Council and Canal and Rivers Trust, that relationship building has led then to further funding being leveraged for Southall. So even just recently, as early as kind of February this year, Canal and Rivers Trust led a bid to the Green and Resilient Spaces Fund, again, mayoral funding, but looking at securing £700,000 for towpath improvements to run sort of an 8-kilometre stretch of Southall, which is based on all of that kind of intelligence and insight and work that we've done to date to kind of really inform the development of a kind of bigger project that will continue to see investment and improvement happening in that area.
Brilliant, thank you. So some real sort of physical, environmental improvements, using that as a way to engage with people. Grace, could you tell us a little bit about what you were doing with young people? How did you find the young people that you were working with? And I mean, you've talked about doing the making workshops. I can't get my head around people making shoes. I mean, that's a really hard thing to do, surely. But some of the ideas of other things you've been, the real kind of physical projects that you've been doing with the young people that you've been working with to keep them engaged. And I think Nicola's point, and I think everyone on the call has made the point about it's not just a kind of a one-off thing. It's about a long-term relationship with those.
I think that's the thing. I mean, it is always a challenge, I think, with young people to find ways to keep them engaged in the long term. And in lots of ways, the regeneration projects are so over so many years, and to a 17-year-old, they're not thinking about 20 years in the future and where they're going to be, but actually these people are potentially going to be the ones that buying or renting properties, and we want to keep people in their communities where they've grown up, if they want to, and to have their input on how that place is shaped. So one of the things that we were really conscious of with Absolute Beginners was to make it really valuable for the young people, and so we used part of the funding to pay them to be there, and paid the London living wage for all of the hours that they took part in the project. And we didn't want it to just be, come along and take part in some sessions. And, we valued their time, and we wanted them to really be committed and want to see it as a sort of opportunity to earn money and to have a benefit that could be beyond the project. And actually, a lot of the young people are keen to come back into the next phase. So hopefully we will be able to secure enough funding to sort of kickstart it. And then the aim is for that to become a sort of sustainable social enterprise business model that can keep generating opportunities for them. So yeah, that's been really interesting. And I think another thing that is sort of runs through the project and some other projects I've done in the recent years is sort of being conscious of the heritage and history of the area. So the whole idea came out of this sort of heritage of making and manufacturing in Park Royal, and looking at some of the skills that have been lost in the past, and how can we sort of teach young people about things being made without technology or without sort of lo-fi methods. So we did partner them up with older people who were makers or ex-workers from the area, and they did interviews, and they sort of had those conversations to kind of draw out that history. And I think that can also be translated across different topics and different projects, that relationship between the communities that have been here for many years and that often might be more likely to come along to engagement events. Often you get a slightly older audience, and there is often this idea of like, things are changing and it's not like it used to be. But then there's also often a really interesting energy from young people, but they're not always in those meetings or in those consultations. So how can we bring those groups together through creative dialogue and projects where they're sort of encouraged to share and discuss and sort of realize that everyone's voice is equally valid. And I think through arts and culture projects, it is a little bit easier to get people excited to kind of, talk about their place because they're doing something, that's fun or more creative than just kind of responding to questionnaires and things like that. So yeah, it's an interesting model that we're hoping can actually translate into these young people being more passionate about their area or more engaged with schemes and consultations for projects. And yeah.
Brilliant, thank you, Grace. And I just want to do a little plug because we're doing an event called Engaging Young Londoners at Future of London in a couple of weeks, which is all about showcasing the amazing things that young people have done in terms of influencing development in London. I'll drop a link in the chat afterwards. But Tan and Joanna, did you want to come back in and just share some of the kind of real practical approaches that you've used to engage with residents?
I think what I learned about Ealing is that we're an incredibly diverse borough. And because we're so diverse, you have to give people the freedom to decide how they want to be heard. And you therefore have to start talking initially about, what are the channels that you would like to convey that information in. So when we were talking to young people about race, they wanted to talk to us through music. They wanted to talk to us through a podcast, through art. That was the best way that they want to express themselves. And that worked really, really well. And then we had a conversation with a local community group that hosts ESOL classes, because we sat there, we thought about how do we talk to or have a conversation with people who are either digitally divided or are part of the digital divide, have language barriers. So we spent a day with an ESOL class having conversations in different languages, and trying to build that trust with them, to be able to give them their voice, to allow them to to give them the freedom to be heard, and to be heard well. And then unfortunately, we also had the challenge of the pandemic. How do you talk to people when they're being told to stay at home, stay indoors? So we went to a sheltered housing unit where there was a voluntary organisation that was supporting the elderly, and we went out while they were delivering their food packages, and we just had these great conversations on the doorstep with all these different people about their experiences in relation to race, the inequalities they were facing through the pandemic. So it was making sure that, we were reaching out to people in different modes, but allowing them to set the tone and the space.
Thank you. Sorry. So I think we probably covered the culture question. So we're talking about sort of people's physical environment, using music, creation of products and things, talking to people about heritage. So obviously culture is a fantastic way of getting people involved in their organisations. My next question I think is actually going to could be to any of you, I think, really, is how will these initiatives and projects be in place for not just the communities today, but will be adaptable for the communities of tomorrow? And that's whoever wants to take that, really. Because I think one of the challenges of consultation that when I was doing it, used to get challenges like, it's all very well talking about the people that live here now, but actually what about the people that will be moving into the area in the future, and how we thinking about them? So who would like to take that?
I'm happy to maybe say a few words on that, Nicola. So I put a few examples in the chat box as well that people can read. What we're developing in Ealing at the moment is a community-led approach to investment and regeneration across our 7 towns, and the first one we've really piloted that in is Northolt, and I've also included the link to that, so people should have a read at that. I think, yeah, it's really about delivering what we need today and the residents and business we currently have in the borough, but also, as you said, a future. So I'm not going to get into the details of an actual development itself and how you design an actual building and the internal layout. I think what this question is more interested in me is its actual neighbourhood and the wider community. So I guess, as I said, what we've got in Ealing is a very clear vision from the leadership about dealing with climate action, tackling inequality, and creating good jobs. So that's big macro stuff that we need to work around, and that applies to the whole of the borough. So, for example, and I'll choose the Northolt example as one of those. So Northolt is in the north west of the borough. You could maybe call it a bit of a left behind part of the borough. It hasn't had much sort of investment or regeneration or enhancements over the last couple of decades, perhaps. Like if you look at the likes of Southall and North Acton, we can see quite a bit of investment and development happening. Northolt maybe hasn't had that. So what we're doing in Northolt is actually working with the local community there and saying, okay, what do you want in Northolt? How do you want your high street to be improved? What type of uses do you want there? What sort of active travel projects do you need? How do you want access to the fantastic array of open spaces in Northolt, which there's a lot of, but it's not accessible. So it's things like that, and that's future-proofing Northolt to deal with these big macro challenges. So one example in Norfolk is we successfully secured levelling up funding from the government to deliver an active travel scheme in Norfolk. That active travel scheme is going to completely transform the town centre and make it much more attractive and accessible for pedestrians and cyclists. So that's dealing with what Norfolk residents want today, but also future-proofing that high street for the future. So I think it's that sort of more bigger scale stuff that Ealing are quite interested in. So it's about making our neighbourhoods more diverse, more resilient, and perhaps can deal better with future shocks like COVID, if God forbid it ever happens again or something similar happens. At least we can make our neighbourhoods a bit more resilient and prepared. Southall is another example. So a lot of folk who lived in Southall would have been working at Heathrow Airport, and they would have lost their jobs as a result of the downturn in the aviation sector, and that's impacting Southall quite a lot. So again, there's the more social side of regeneration as well. So how is the council supporting these Southall residents to reskill, upskill, and access new jobs of the future and things like that? So it's the physical, which I've just talked about in Norfolk, but also the social as well, which the Southall example picks up. So that's the sort of broader approach we're trying to instill.
And can I ask, Conor, because obviously jobs are critical, are there particular sort of jobs that, or I guess particular sort of industries or sectors that Ealing is looking to bring into the borough, or is it more general than that?
I think it's probably quite general. I think it's probably counterproductive to really focus on a single sector or even a few sectors. I think you need a real diverse local economy. And I think in Ealing we've discovered due to the pandemic that our economy was fragile and not as resilient as it should have been. Like Ealing was, I think, in the top 2 furloughed regions in London, and our economy probably will recover a bit slower as a result of that. But certainly Ealing's got a very rich heritage of creativity, productivity, and the Ealing cinema and all the various things that go around that. So we've quite a strong creative digital industries sector already. I really want to build on that because they are the jobs of the future. That industry is going to keep growing and growing. So we're already acting on that. So it's been announced yesterday, so I can say this now. It was embargoed for quite a long time. Ealing is one of the 2 new boroughs that have got creative enterprise zone status. So in North Acton and Park Royal, we've got the Mayor of London has agreed that should be creative enterprise zone. So again, that's going to really reinforce the creative digital industry sector in that part of the borough, but also enable other parts of the borough to tap into that because we want the whole borough to really benefit from that. So the CEZ is going to be really exciting. So probably, if I was going to choose a sector, it's probably that one. But again, I'll go back and say we're going to be targeting lots of investment in Ealing. So if there's any investors or developers on the call, they're interested in developing in Ealing, like we're here to listen and we'd welcome those conversations.
Great, thank you, Conor. I might come back to the developer conversation, but a question to Nicola and Tan and Joanna and Grace. Except I've forgotten what the question was. Oh, it was thinking about future generations, future communities, and how you think about who's going to be coming into the borough in the future, and how do you, I guess, design engagement projects around that. And Nicola, you talked a lot about Catalyst, being invested in Ealing for the long term, having been there for 70 years already. So
yeah, I think one of the beauties of something like the Openhab Block project is the opportunity that it provides through being a meanwhile space. So it has the capacity to kind of evolve and adapt and change, and you can imagine that the conversations that we might have had with funders about trying to secure investment for this project, like, if it's going to be regenerated, it's going to get knocked down, that's sort of, what's the point? And fortunately, we've got some excellent funders on the project who really understand what it's trying to achieve beyond just this meanwhile, this minimum 5 years, and recognizing the opportunity it presents to test ideas, to activate spaces, to innovate, to build relationships, to kind of harness the potential of existing people that live and work in the area, to give them a platform to kind of grow their kind of enterprises or their activities, and for that to really inform the longer term master plan for the wider regeneration of the Havelock estate. So, how is what we're doing through Open Havelock how's that learning going to be applied to what the commercial or community offer looks like in Havelock, but also South or more widely across the borough as a whole? How is it going to inform the way that we, design and think about access to the canal towpath, as we've talked about? But for me, I think the really kind of the simple thing about it is that Open Havelock will create this space for sort of social connectivity and create the place where those opportunities for people to connect, to get to know each other, to bring people together from different walks of life and different perspectives, and that I think can really help to bring communities, both existing and kind of new people that are coming into the area together, and hopefully mean that conversation can continue. You've got a platform to be able to do that from.
Yeah. And I think it is important, isn't it, is to have that ability to experiment and try things out and go, we tried it, it didn't work, this is what we've learned, move on, try something different. I think, and often that's maybe, it's great that you've got investors that are happy and willing to do that. Grace and Tan and Joanna, sort of your thoughts on engaging with future communities.
I wanted to mention that currently we're working with Conor on the local plan, and it's the development plan for the next 15 years. So one of the conversations that's key to getting it right is talking to young people. So going into schools and making sure that future generations are part of that conversation and we're planning it all right. The other element is actually making sure that you start having conversations with developers from a very early stage. So we've got a massive development called Greenford Quays in Greenford, and we're connecting with our developers, whether it's the head of community engagement actually at Greystar, to make sure we're having conversations that enable that new community to feel connected with the existing community. So it's not a gated community, and that they're part of the borough and that we welcome them. And part of that is making sure, you're there when there's a launch of a new building. You're talking to the new community, you're making sure that they know that you're there. And we want to develop a whole new relationship of activity and information sharing. And making sure that you do it in a kind of a fun way. It can't be all very serious. So there's a lot of ways you can broker that conversation.
And can I ask you, because obviously the council and Catalyst are doing a lot of consultation yourself, what sort of, I guess, how picky are you when developers come like Greystar and they say, yes, we're going to do consultation? Like how sort of prescriptive are you, or how demanding are you of how they do their consultation? Because I guess, we're on this conversation because a lot of consultation is done badly. And so sort of, yeah, so how how engaged is the council in making sure that those developers do good consultation?
I think the one thing that we need to be careful of is actual consultation fatigue, and making sure we're not all trying to reach out to the same communities at once, and that we're doing it in a very coordinated way. The other thing is, I think that, the traditional ways of consultation, sticking a sign on a lamppost or putting some leaflets through the door just don't work. But I think we've come a long way with developers, and this massive desire from Ealing Council to make sure that the engagement is genuine and real, and is enabling us to broker relationships with developers to ensure that their engagement is also genuine and gives people the freedom to decide how they want to converse with them, which hasn't happened in the past, which is a really great thing going forward.
Great, thank you, Tan. Joanna, did you want to come in?
Just on that point, I think what helps is if we're not being prescriptive, kind of in response to your question, but if we have a kind of advisory role, because we do have that kind of permanence in the long-term relationship with people, that if they kind of listen. And I think Tan does some brilliant work on that kind of across the borough, is kind of advising how best to do it for the place that they're in, and not to make any assumptions about the people or the place. So yeah, not prescriptive, but advisory, and taking advantage of that, and not coming in and without the connections and kind of failing to make them, but working with us.
And I suppose the council and others have a lot to offer developers in terms of networks and just knowledge of who's who in the local community as well. We've got a great question actually from Manda, so either for Nicola or Grace. It would be good to hear about your experience of engaging with SMEs, the business community, or entrepreneurs, as Grace has talked about, as they are really important to the local economy. So your thoughts on that?
I actually wanted to mention another project that I'm working on as well, which is related to this. So the Park Royal Design District, which it started last September as part of London Design Festival, and I'm now working with a number of creative businesses and artists in Park Royal to deliver the second year and also year-round programming. So it's all about supporting the small creative businesses and artists within Park Royal. And we found that there's at least 500 small entrepreneurs and freelancers in the creative sector, which is obviously, brilliant, especially in light of the newly announced creative enterprise zone for that area. And one of the things that I found through this project is, lots of these small businesses, they're so busy, they don't necessarily have time to sort of hear or understand about what's happening locally. They want to be involved, they really want to sort of, contribute to the area, but they're sort of busy running their business or doing their work. And so by creating this community, or the network, which the Park Royal Design District is looking to do, it's a way to sort of give those small businesses more of a voice, more sort of weight, and able to represent them. We've set up an advisory group, which is a not-for-profit sort of organisation, so that they can apply for funding, but also a sort of steering group, which is representative of all the different people in the area, so that they can sort of be a conduit for information, both ways, in terms of through the council or the developers in the area, and looking for opportunities. And we have a newsletter and things like that. So I think this also relates back to the other question about the future, but strengthening networks and communities, and then giving those people the opportunity and sort of to have more power, more sort of influence by being stronger in number is a really good way. So if people sort of developers or investors can support that, and often it only needs a small amount of funding really to kickstart these types of network projects and organizations that can then become longer term and stay in the area for the long term.
Yeah, I think it's a really great question, and Southwell in particular is a place that's kind of defined by entrepreneurialism, small medium enterprises, startups, people kind of really creatively bringing sort of initiatives forward. And one of the things that we did on the Openhab project, which was really, really insightful and revealing, was, and I think Alison, our project architect, is on the call as well, so she might be able to feed in on the chat. But we did this feasibility piece at the start, which included mapping, really looking at kind of what was happening within Havelock and the surrounding areas. And when you kind of looked at all the enterprise and activities that were happening, the Havelock estate in itself really looked like there was a dearth of things happening. There was not a lot. But we undertook a listening project, a piece of work that was about doing some really intentional, long transcribed interviews. We did lots of vox pops. We worked with students at Havelock Primary School to teach them how to make podcasts, and they went home and they podcasted with their families. And what we found was that actually there was a whole rich layer of activity that was happening that was just invisible. And things like you had people kind of running nail bars, people with therapeutic practice businesses, local food startups. One chap, a Somalian guy, was taking food over to Brick Lane every weekend, Somalian food that he was preparing, and actually, just sort of was interested in thinking about how that food offer could be made more local. There was a chap that we found that did calisthenic exercises, if I've said that right, like using the space around his home and his home to sort of deliver these activities. So the Openhab lot project's really about trying to shine a light on all of that amazing creativity and enterprise and work that's happening, and to provide a space where people can grow their profile or kind of further develop that kind of enterprise activity on a very, very local scale. So I think, it's really about trying to find ways to kind of showcase that stuff that is there, that is happening.
And I guess also, as Grace was saying, it's an opportunity for people to meet each other and I guess support each other as well in their work. Tan and Joanna or Conor, did you want to come back to on that question about engaging with SMEs and local businesses?
I can come in on that one, Nicola. Yeah, I did refer to the High Streets Task Force earlier, so we're certainly doing a lot of engagement with our SMEs across our many high streets, but we need to sort of expand that to work more with our SMEs in other parts of the borough, particularly our industrial areas. So Ealing's got lots of industrial areas, strategic industrial land plus local industrial land, and lots of SMEs in there. So we're currently working on that at the moment. We're also we're exploring the idea of maybe developing an Ealing Business Board or Ealing Business Forum, again, which could be another sort of opportunity to engage with large businesses, SMEs plus micro businesses as well. Ealing's economy is made up, 93% of our local economy is micro businesses, so we can't forget about them. They're a big part of the economy. But yeah, so it's a lot of work happening in the background in that.
Okay, great.
Oh, sorry, and just one more thing. Our new inward investment model, which was previously very much focused on developers and housing-led construction industry, is now still got that, but we're now including businesses, including SMEs, the third sector organisations, community groups, and inward investors. So it's a much more broad church of how we want to bring all those groups together in the Ealing context. So that's going to be quite useful as well.
Great, thank you, Conor. I'm conscious of time. We've got literally sort of 2 minutes left. So I'm going to ask each of our panelists to give one piece of, I guess, guidance or recommendation or advice in how us as a built environment sector can ensure that we genuinely engage with communities. Grace, I'm going to come to you first, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. I think I would say that it's definitely start early and look at all of the existing projects and groups on the ground already, and really try to get a good understanding of the work that's already been done, because often we find sort of, people coming new to the area and then it's almost like starting from scratch. But there's been so much engagement and people, have already developed these projects, and there's lots of groups in existence, and then try to sort of hear all of their views, but also spot the gaps and people that maybe aren't taking part in projects or engagement already. And I think it's really about, yes, trying to recognise and understand as much historic and existing consultation and engagement that's happening, and apply that to your approach.
Great, thank you, Grace. I'm going to go to Tan, and then Nicola, and then Joanna, and then Conor.
I think my advice would be know your community. Really, that's so important. Knowing who you're talking to and not assuming that they look exactly the same as the last community that you spoke to, and then making sure that you work with the people who also know that community, using local connections, using the voluntary and community sector, who are just a vital asset to that conversation. And also, don't ask people to come to you. You need to reach out to them.
Thank you. Nicola, Joanna, and Conor, really quickly, because we've literally got about half a minute. Sorry.
I think definitely it's about really valuing the knowledge, the experience, the capabilities, the people that make up the place. We really have to start, have to really kind of start with what's working well, what can be celebrated, and build from there.
Brilliant, thank you. Joanna, and then Conor.
Think about what's in it for them. Think about it from their point of view, what they want to get out of it, and then you might start in the right place.
Great. And last word to you, Conor.
Yeah, get to know your community, build trust, be open and transparent from the very start.
Okay, fantastic. I think that's been an amazing, very quick hour. Thank you so much to all the panelists for all your insight. I'm going to hand over to Callum.
Thanks, Nicola, and thanks as well to our panel for a great discussion this morning. I must also give a special thanks to Ealing Council for their partnering of this session, and also an even more special thanks to you, the audience, for engaging with us this morning. It was really great to see the chat coming alive with lots of questions and the panel getting involved to answer those as best as we all could. And before we leave, I just wanted to make you aware of the sessions we have taking place for the remainder of today. Right now, we are looking at the new free ports and how they will impact the industrial and logistics market. And then at 2 o'clock, we close the day and our June 2022 programme of events with a session hosted in partnership with Commonplace, where we ask, how can digital platforms and data be harnessed to modernise planning and engagement? You can find out more about these sessions, along with all of the sessions that have taken place this week, by visiting the programme page on our website, www.realestatelive.co.uk. If you haven't been able to make a session this week, do not fear. All sessions have been recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel in the coming days. Just search for Real Estate Live UK on YouTube. And to stay up to date, follow us on LinkedIn, Real Estate Live UK. Thank you all once again for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thank you and goodbye.